The grandeur of the White House's East Room was on full display that evening, bathed in the warm glow of chandeliers as top military officers and government officials gathered for an exclusive reception honoring the U.S. Navy's latest advancements. President Donald Trump, standing tall in his navy blue suit and signature red tie, was making his way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries with some of the nation's most distinguished officers. It was a night of celebration. The U.S. Navy had recently commissioned its most advanced aircraft carrier, USS Liberty, symbolizing America's commitment to military strength and global dominance. Among the many decorated officers present, one stood out, not just for her crisp white uniform but for the undeniable fire in her eyes. She was Captain Elizabeth "Liz" Carter, a 32-year-old commanding officer, one of the youngest ever to helm a Navy destroyer. Her reputation preceded her, an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, a decorated strategist, and a vocal advocate for modernization within the military. Though relatively young, she had a sharp mind and a bold voice, never shying away from speaking her truth. As President Trump continued through the reception, his staff subtly directed him toward Liz. Her unique position as one of the youngest female captains had caught the media's attention, and his advisors saw an opportunity for a powerful photo op. But what happened next was something no one had anticipated. Trump extended his hand with a charismatic smile. "Captain Carter, I hear you're quite the rising star." Liz shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to serve." Trump nodded approvingly. "So, how's our Navy doing under your command?" he asked, a playful smirk crossing his lips. "Are we still the strongest in the world, or do we need to make some changes?" She hesitated just a moment before answering, choosing her words carefully. "Sir, we are undoubtedly the most powerful naval force in the world. But power alone isn't enough. We need to stay ahead of our adversaries in technology, training, and strategy. Strength is more than just numbers." Trump raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Go on." Liz knew this was a rare opportunity. The President of the United States was actually listening, and she had his attention. "Mr. President, our ships are cutting edge, but we're facing recruitment issues. Morale isn't what it used to be. Many talented young Americans hesitate to join because they feel disconnected from the mission. We need to do a better job of showing them why the Navy isn't just a career, it's a calling." Trump leaned back slightly, processing her words. "Interesting," he said. "You're saying we're not selling the dream well enough?" Liz smiled. "Something like that, sir. Patriotism isn't dead, but it needs inspiration. People don't just want to hear that we're the greatest. They want to be part of something that actually feels great." A brief silence followed. The room around them was buzzing with chatter, but for a moment, the conversation between the president and the young captain felt like the only thing happening in the world. Trump tapped his chin. "And what would you do if you were sitting in my chair?" Liz's heart pounded. This was a loaded question. She took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I'd start by listening to the people who are out there every day, sir. The ones who aren't sitting in DC making policies, but the ones out on the ships, flying the planes and running the operations. The future of our military isn't just in the hands of policymakers. It's in the hands of those serving." Trump smirked, impressed. "You're not afraid to say it straight, huh?" Liz chuckled. "No, sir. My job isn't to be liked. It's to lead." The president nodded, his expression shifting from amusement to something more serious. "All right, Captain Carter. Let's say I want to shake things up. What's the first thing we change?" The moment hung in the air, thick with expectation. Liz could feel the weight of her words before she even spoke them. And then, with unwavering confidence, she answered, "To be continued." Liz took a steady breath. She knew she had to tread carefully. One wrong word could turn this rare opportunity into a wasted moment. But she wasn't here to play it safe. She was here to make a difference. "Mr. President, if I had to change one thing first," she began, "it would be how we prepare our forces for the future. Warfare is evolving: cyber threats, drone technology, artificial intelligence. We're still focusing too much on traditional combat training when the real battlefield is shifting." Trump folded his arms, his expression one of deep thought. You're saying we're spending billions on battleships when the war won't even be fought at sea? Liz nodded. Not entirely, sir. We'll always need ships, but future conflicts won't be won just by firepower. They'll be won by intelligence, by who controls the information, who commands the cyber networks, and who can outthink the enemy before a shot is ever fired. A small crowd of military officers and White House aides had started gathering around them, sensing that something significant was unfolding. The usual small talk and formalities had been replaced by a real discussion, one that could potentially change military policy. Trump glanced at one of his top advisors, who was listening intently. Then he turned back to Liz. You're saying we need to invest more in cyber warfare and tech-driven strategy? Yes, sir. And not just invest, we need to change the way we recruit and train. We're still measuring leadership by outdated standards. We need tech-savvy minds, not just muscle. The future of the Navy isn't just in command and control. It's in innovation. The president leaned forward slightly. I like people who think outside the box, Captain Carter. And you seem like one of them. Liz smiled. Thank you, sir. I believe in our military strength, but strength without strategy is just muscle without a brain. A chuckle rippled through the surrounding group, but Trump's expression remained thoughtful. So what would that look like? You're talking about reforming recruitment, training, and operations. That's a pretty big shift. Liz nodded. It is, but it's necessary. We need programs that attract America's best young minds, engineers, hackers, AI specialists. They should be in our ranks, not sitting in Silicon Valley working for private firms. We should be competing for the same talent as Google and SpaceX. Trump smirked. Let me guess. Right now, those kids don't see the Navy as their first choice? Liz hesitated before answering. With all due respect, sir, no, they don't. The room went silent for a moment. A few advisors shifted uncomfortably. No one was used to hearing someone speak to the president this directly. Trump exhaled sharply, then laughed. Well, that's a hell of a problem, isn't it? Yes, sir. But it's also an opportunity, Liz replied, standing her ground. Trump nodded, clearly intrigued. All right, Captain. You're not just here to shake my hand and take a picture. You've got ideas. Let's say I take this seriously. What's step one? Liz didn't hesitate. A task force, Mr. President. We bring in top strategists, young officers, and cybersecurity experts to outline a roadmap for modernizing our military. We make service in the armed forces as attractive as working in the private sector. We create pathways for the best minds to serve their country and not just chase stock options. Trump tilted his head, considering. A task force, huh? And I assume you'd want to be on it. Liz smiled. If it means helping shape the future of our military, absolutely, sir. Trump let out a short laugh, shaking his head in amusement. You've got guts, Captain. I like that. He glanced around at the now silent room, filled with military brass and White House officials. All right, let's make something happen. Get the right people together, draft a plan, and put it on my desk. The murmurs around the room grew louder. Liz had walked into this reception as just another officer in uniform. Now, she was leading a conversation that could shape military policy for years to come. She straightened her posture and saluted. Yes, sir. Trump returned the gesture with a firm nod. Let's see what you can do. And with that, the conversation that started as an impromptu exchange had turned into a nationwide initiative. The world was about to take notice. The next morning, news of the conversation between President Trump and Captain Liz Carter had already spread like wildfire. Political analysts, military experts, and media outlets across the country were abuzz with speculation. President Trump meets young Navy captain. Is military reform on the horizon? Read one headline. A new kind of military leadership? Captain Carter's bold ideas gain attention. Another proclaimed. Cable news networks aired footage from the reception, replaying clips of Liz's direct exchange with the president. Conservative and liberal commentators alike debated what it meant. Some praised her courage and forward-thinking approach. Others questioned whether the military should shift its focus from traditional combat readiness. By noon, Liz's phone was flooded with messages. Fellow officers congratulated her, while skeptics warned her that she had stepped into a political minefield. Then came the call she wasn't expecting, directly from the White House. Captain Carter, the president would like you to meet with his senior defense team this Friday. Can you be in D.C.? Liz took a deep breath. This was it. Yes, absolutely. I'll be there. Friday morning, the White House Situation Room. Liz found herself seated across from some of the most powerful figures in Washington: Secretary of Defense Mark Reynolds, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Thomas Mitchell, and National Security Advisor Rachel McAdams. President Trump sat at the head of the long conference table, casually sipping Diet Coke as he surveyed the room. All right, folks, Trump said, setting his can down. We're here because Captain Carter says we need to rethink how we train, recruit, and fight wars in the future. I want to know, are we ahead of the game, or are we behind? A brief silence followed before General Mitchell spoke. Mr. President, the U.S. military is the most powerful force on Earth. We invest billions in cutting-edge technology, and our men and women are the best trained in the world. Liz leaned forward slightly. With all due respect, sir, power alone isn't enough. China and Russia are investing heavily in cyber warfare and artificial intelligence. They're attacking our digital infrastructure daily. It's not just about who has the biggest guns anymore. It's about who controls the battlefield before the fight even starts. McAdams nodded. She's not wrong. We've seen increased cyber aggression. But shifting priorities within the military is complicated. Trump drummed his fingers on the table. So what's the move? Liz didn't hesitate. We create an elite unit, a strategic cyber command, composed of the best minds in artificial intelligence, cyber defense, and strategic innovation. Not just trained officers, but civilians, industry leaders, and cybersecurity experts. A division that doesn't just respond to threats, but actively shapes the future of warfare. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. You're talking about integrating civilians into military operations? Liz nodded. Yes, sir. We already rely on private sector tech companies for innovation. Why not build a branch of the military that recruits and trains these people directly? Trump looked around the table. What's stopping us from doing this? Mitchell cleared his throat. Red tape, bureaucracy, resistance from within the ranks. Change in the military doesn't happen overnight, Mr. President. Trump smirked. Maybe it should. Liz's heart pounded. Was this actually happening? Trump turned back to her. Captain Carter, if I put you in charge of drafting a plan for this cyber command, could you get it done? Liz swallowed hard. Yes, sir. I'd need a team, access to data, and resources, but I could do it. Trump grinned. Then you've got it. I want a proposal in 2 weeks. The room erupted into quiet murmurs of disbelief. The president had just handed a major initiative to a young Navy captain in real time. Liz nodded firmly. Understood, sir. I won't let you down. Trump stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Good. Now let's make America's military future-proof. As Liz walked out of the room, she knew her life had just changed forever, but she had no idea just how big this was going to get. Within hours of the White House meeting, news broke that President Trump had tasked Captain Liz Carter with drafting a proposal for a strategic cyber command. The headlines became even more explosive. Trump taps young Navy captain to shape military's future. Is this the birth of America's cyber warfare division? Military insiders skeptical of sudden shakeup. On cable news, talking heads debated the decision. This is unprecedented, one anchor said. A sitting president just handed a major national security initiative to a relatively young officer. Is this brilliance or recklessness? Meanwhile, inside the Pentagon, not everyone was thrilled. Some high-ranking officers saw Liz's rise as an insult to traditional military hierarchy. Others, particularly older commanders who had spent decades climbing the ranks, saw her appointment as a political stunt rather than a strategic move. Liz, however, had no time to worry about the politics. She locked herself in a conference room with a small team of trusted officers and cybersecurity experts, drafting the first outlines of the Strategic Cyber Command. She worked tirelessly, reading classified reports on cyber threats, consulting with intelligence agencies, and even reaching out to private sector leaders. The plan needed to be flawless. 1 week later, the backlash begins. Just as Liz was finalizing her proposal, a massive leak hit the media. A classified report on America's cyber vulnerabilities, one of the very documents Liz had been studying, was leaked to the press. It detailed how foreign adversaries had already penetrated key infrastructure systems, including power grids and financial networks. Within hours, it became the biggest story in the country. Is America already under cyber attack? One headline read. Opposition politicians seized on the leak, accusing the Trump administration of failing to protect national security. Some even called the president's decision to hand the cyber warfare initiative to a relatively unknown Navy captain a reckless move. In a heated press conference, a senator from the opposition party slammed the administration. The idea that national security can be handled like a reality TV show is absurd. Our military deserves experienced leadership, not someone handpicked for a photo op. The pressure was mounting. That evening, Liz's phone rang. It was a call from the president himself. Captain Carter. Trump's unmistakable voice came through, firm but calm. Tell me you've got something good. Liz straightened her posture. Yes, sir. I have the plan ready. It's aggressive, but it's exactly what we need. Trump exhaled. Good. Because tomorrow, you're coming to the Oval Office to present it. Liz's stomach tightened. This was it. But little did she know, things were about to get even more intense. The next morning, the Oval Office. Captain Liz Carter stood in front of the resolute desk, a neatly bound document in her hands. Across from her sat President Donald Trump, flanked by Secretary of Defense Mark Reynolds, National Security Advisor Rachel McAdams, and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Thomas Mitchell. The tension in the room was palpable. Trump leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the desk. All right, Captain. Let's hear it. Liz took a steady breath. This was the moment she had spent her entire career preparing for. Mr. President, our biggest threat isn't a traditional military force. It's a war being fought in the shadows. Foreign adversaries are infiltrating our power grids, manipulating financial markets, and even meddling in our democratic institutions. She placed her report on the desk and continued. The Strategic Cyber Command would be a specialized, independent branch of the military. Its purpose would be threefold: defend our national infrastructure from cyber threats, disrupt foreign attacks before they happen, innovate with cutting-edge technology to maintain dominance in cyber warfare. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. The way we fight wars is changing, sir. If we don't evolve, we will be outmaneuvered not by missiles but by malware. Trump looked at General Mitchell. General, what do you think? Mitchell, an old-school military man, sighed. Mr. President, I won't deny cyber warfare is a growing concern. But an independent command? That's a massive restructuring of our military. Liz spoke up. Sir, with respect, the bureaucracy is the problem. Right now, cybersecurity is split between different military branches, intelligence agencies, and private contractors. We're not coordinated. We're reactive, not proactive. Reynolds, the Secretary of Defense, leaned back in his chair. And how would you recruit for this? Traditional military service doesn't exactly appeal to computer engineers and AI specialists. Liz flipped to a page in her report and slid it across the desk. We create an alternative service pathway. Instead of forcing tech talent to fit into traditional military roles, we design an elite program, one that offers flexible service options, competitive compensation, and direct collaboration with the private sector. She pointed to the recruitment projections in the document. With this approach, we could attract the best minds in cybersecurity, just like elite special forces attract the best warriors. Trump nodded slowly, a grin forming. So, instead of forcing people into a system that doesn't work for them, we build a new system around them? Exactly, sir. There was a long silence. Then Trump picked up the report and flipped through it. Finally, he slammed it shut with a decisive thud. I like it. Liz's pulse quickened. Trump turned to Reynolds and Mitchell. Get me a full analysis, but fast. If this holds up, we're making it happen. Mitchell gave a slow nod. Yes, sir. Trump pointed at Liz. And you, Captain Carter, you just rewrote the playbook. Liz felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just a policy shift. This was history in the making. 1 week later, the nationwide reaction. When President Trump officially announced the creation of Strategic Cyber Command, it dominated headlines. Supporters hailed it as a bold, visionary move, ensuring that the U.S. military would lead in the cyber age. Critics, however, called it reckless, a rushed decision driven by political theater rather than strategy. On social media, Liz's name trended for days. Some praised her as a pioneer, while others accused her of being a political pawn. But Liz didn't care about the noise. She had come to Washington as just another officer. Now, she was at the center of a movement that could change the future of warfare. And she was just getting started. Epilogue: a legacy begins. Months later, Liz stood in a newly constructed facility in Fort Meade, Maryland, watching as the first recruits of Strategic Cyber Command arrived. She thought back to that night at the White House reception, where this all began. Back then, she was just another officer. Now, she was the face of a new era in American defense. And in the years to come, when cyber warfare became the defining battlefield of the 21st century, history would remember the moment Captain Liz Carter and President Donald Trump changed the game forever. Mitchell gave a slow nod. Yes, sir. Trump pointed at Liz. And you, Captain Carter, you just rewrote the playbook. Liz felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just a policy shift. This was history in the making. 1 week later, the nationwide reaction. When President Trump officially announced the creation of Strategic Cyber Command, it dominated headlines. Supporters hailed it as a bold, visionary move, ensuring that the U.S. military would lead in the cyber age. Critics, however, called it reckless, a rushed decision driven by political theater rather than strategy. On social media, Liz's name trended for days. Some praised her as a pioneer, while others accused her of being a political pawn. But Liz didn't care about the noise. She had come to Washington as just another officer. Now, she was at the center of a movement that could change the future of warfare. And she was just getting started. Epilogue: a legacy begins. Months later, Liz stood in a newly constructed facility in Fort Meade, Maryland, watching as the first recruits of Strategic Cyber Command arrived. She thought back to that night at the White House reception, where this all began. Back then, she was just another officer. Now, she was the face of a new era in American defense. And in the years to come, when cyber warfare became the defining battlefield of the 21st century, history would remember the moment Captain Liz Carter and President Donald Trump changed the game forever.